Mac and Mac guys here on Birds 365. We got our buddy Les Bowen. You got to check out his podcast, Bowen on the Birds, and he hops on with us when we ask him for his insights. Les, here's where I need to start today. Okay. You were still on the beat for Sirianni's rookie year, right? No, you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, sort of. Part of the year. Yeah.
Okay, so part of the year. At any point during that year, did you suggest to Nick Sirianni should give up play calling and allow
Oh man, we got to go down this route.
Yeah, that was exactly. Yeah, Nick. I said, Nick. You know, you're 2-5. This isn't going. No, what a ridiculous.
Yeah, I figured it was you, Bowen. I didn't know if it was Gannon, but I know somebody had to get in his ear and make him give it up. So I thought maybe it was you.
So I guess you guys saw it, and Marcus Hayes has a column today that basically refutes that an Eagle source says this this is a total fantasy on Jonathan Gannon's part, that it never happened, which doesn't surprise me at all. He said about 12 things now, starting with the media.
He's not good with messaging, Les, and I like Jonathan personally. He's not good with messaging. Yeah. Here's how I describe it. I read the piece. I think it was Zach Keeper, so I want to give him credit from the Athletic.
Yes.
Like, I believe that was his advice to Nick Sirianni as sort of friends and colleagues. Epic, from the standpoint of Nick was, because I think Nick, and by the way, I say that because he told me that. He said epic. He told me that numerous times. He said, what do I care? But from Nick's standpoint, there was a concern. We've talked about it on this show. I'm sure you've talked about it. When you give up play calling, when you're hired to be a play caller, and when you give up play calling, that looks bad. That's like, oh. So I think from the standpoint, I think what happened is Nick was telling Jonathan he was thinking about giving up play calling, and he was like, but I'm going to look bad. And Jonathan said, F it. Like, that part I believe.
Right.
I don't believe Jonathan Gannon
came up with the idea.
Yes, came up with the idea. So that's kind of, and he's really bad with messaging. Like the talked about the reporters like you, Les, and me, and we said, oh, Jonathan Gannon should be fired. That never happened. He kind of conflated it with WIP. And by the way, he told one of the Eagles PR guys he wanted to apologize to us, the beat reporters. I don't think they gave that information out. They gave it out to some people, but not everyone. So I think it was conflated. He's poor with messaging. He really is. And he's got to tighten that up. But I in other words, part of the story I think is right on, but no, I don't think Jonathan Gannon said, hey, Nick, you should give up play calling. And Nick said, yeah, I should, Jonathan.
Let me just add one thing to it. If he and the quote was, hey, if we're 3-14, we're all going to get fired. Okay, so then guess what? Enjoy your year in Arizona, John, because you're going 2-15. And if you're right, you should get your ass fired when the season's over and done with.
Well,
yeah, they might. I mean, it's they're tanking, but it
purposefully.
You kind of have to, when you're in that situation, you have to keep guys together and focused and believing that they're out there for a purpose. I don't think the NFL is a good place to tank.
No, it's not.
People are going out there putting their lives on the line, more or less, every week. The careers are so short. Every year is so precious to you as a player. You're being asked to play for a team that isn't trying to win. I think that's a lot to ask.
Agreed.
And I don't think it goes well when people do that. I think people are going to want out of there. I think people are going to sort of stop trying, and it's going to be real ugly if they don't, if they don't manage to be competitive.
A team that's trying to lose with a coach that's bad at messaging equals dumpster fire. Man,
well, I think it is going to be a dumpster fire this year. But here's the only thing I'll say about that, guys. One, the GM is friends with him, understands the plan, much like Sam Hinkie here. And by the way, anybody who knows I can't stand tanking, so I'm not defending it. But the back end of this, and I agree with you, Les, they might have the first and second picks of the draft. They might get Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr.
Right.
Bang, bang at the
that
top.
Would make a difference. Yes.
Yeah. And all of a sudden, you're off and running. So I would just say everything situationally. If you go 3-14 in Philadelphia, you're getting fired.
Right.
If you go 3-14 or even 1-16 in Arizona, which knows they're tanking and knows the end game is Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr., I think you might be Brett Brown. Right. Ultimately, you're going to get fired, but not right away.
Yeah, but then when you get Bidwell on the line doing an interview with him, I go, my partner, John McMullen, says the worst thing you can do is have a defensive head coach if you're going to go with a good young quarterback.
I don't
Why
like
the hell are you keeping Jonathan Gannon as your head coach? Get his ass out the door ASAP.
I'm honest about that, Les. I would never hire a defensive head coach in the current environment in the NFL.
No.
I wouldn't. I wouldn't. Period. End of sentence. I would not.
You can make it work if you have a really good offensive coordinator, but if you have a really good offensive coordinator, the very next year he'll be somebody else's.
Exactly. So I'm like, I don't think it's fair to those guys, but if somebody and by the way, feel free if somebody wants to parachute $6 billion or so in my bank account and I buy an NFL team, I'm not even looking at defensive guys.
Right.
But I think you guys hire a defensive guy if you've got an established quarterback. But here's where I agree with you, John.
Right.
If you're taking the number one pick in the draft or quarterback in the first 4 picks, and you got to build it from the right, you're better off with an offensive head coach. That I agree with you.
But while we're on the Gannon subject, I know this is your show, and I shouldn't hijack the topic.
Go for it.
No, go for it. I love when people hijack.
So the other thing in that story is the explanations of the 2 touchdowns in the Super Bowl. And I had problems with both of those explanations. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. Blown coverage, 0 blitz. Yeah.
The one he just says basically it was the players' fault that we had covered this the right way all year and we didn't cover it in the Super Bowl. I don't like that because he's the one coaching the players. And I, as with a lot of his statements, we haven't vetted that. I don't know that they covered it all year long. I know there was a lot made after the game of an instance in a 2021 game where they didn't cover it, which is probably where Kansas City got the idea to run that. I don't like a coach that says, well, I told him what to do.
Well, again, I agree, Les, but it's messaging. And I've been telling Jody since day one, look, I hate this scheme that the Eagles run. Jody knows. I hate the Fangio scheme. I think too many people run it. I think people are figuring it out. But I said the Eagles all year, long before the Super Bowl, I said the Eagles were the best of the Fangio defensive teams because they communicated well on the back end. You see these other teams, blown coverages all over the place with this damn defense. Blown coverages all over the place.
And for some reason that day they did not communicate well.
Especially they didn't.
In the second half. And that second touchdown, he said, okay, that we were in a 0 blitz.
0 blitz, yeah.
But he didn't really even take responsibility for that. What he said was that he looked at what the defensive backs coach had them doing and thought, well, that's probably what I would have done.
Yeah, he palmed it off on the defensive backs coach, which
the
was
weird. Yeah,
maybe why that side, what side
responsible for what this cover. I mean, he's saying that's probably what I would have done, but there's a layer there of separation.
Oh,
he's
yeah.
taking himself out of the actual.
And as a leader, you got to take responsibility. Yeah. See, here's where I criticize Jonathan here in this instance. You have to take responsibility, even if it's not your fault.
Yes. Andy Reid.
Always.
Yeah. If it's successful, you give the players credit. If it's not successful, you got to take the blame. That part I agree with. On the other hand, and this is long before I even talked to JG about it, that's what I said to Jody. Blown coverage, 0 blitz. I'm not making it up. He didn't tell it to me. That's what happened in the game.
Yeah.
And the Eagles were the best team in football. Not in football, the best team of the Fangio defenses, and they blew the coverage. I mean, and then I think Jonathan, ironically, maybe to a certain extent, zero blitz. They're not a zero blitz team. That's not what they do. So I criticize them more for the zero blitz, but the fan base loves the zero blitz. Yeah. Not when it doesn't work, though.
Right. And, you know, you did have the slippery field and all that, which made pass rush really problematic for the Eagles, and gave people this idea that Kansas City's offensive line had done this wonderful job, you know. But, you know, it just everything he says just seems to have something that sort of tweaks you a little bit, you know.
He's got to tighten up his messaging. He really does. You can't, if you're the head coach of a football team, you can't just say stuff like, oh, they wanted me fired, or oh, we were 9-0 and they weren't 9-0. Even little things like that, you got to tighten things up.
Right.
He's got to learn that. I don't know if he will. I don't know if he won't. But I can't get on board. I'm sorry. Here's where I can't. People saying he was a bad coach here, I can't get on board with that.
Yeah.
Les, you got to go back to 1991 to find a defense that was ranked higher in the NFL than the Eagles defense last season. Now, you can put it in the context of the quarterbacks. They never played bad quarterbacks before. You were here for the Andy Reid era. I remember Andy's success, the NFC East was bad. Andy would get that all the time. Well, who are you beating?
Yeah, it was. And that, you know, I remember this with Jim Johnson. I mean, we had maybe my first year covering the Eagles. Peyton Manning showed up one day at the vet, and nothing Jim Johnson did made any difference whatsoever.
Yeah.
It's I understand that part of it. I do think the defensive rankings were a little bit of a mirage, because they didn't, whenever they played a good quarterback, they did have trouble. And maybe it is the scheme, as you say. I don't really know.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the scheme. Yeah. But even the year before, when he had Jannard Avery and not Hassan Reddick, and he had Javon Hargrave playing nose tackle, not Jordan Davis or Linval Joseph. And Javon's a great player, but can't play nose tackle. They were number 10.
Yeah.
He was here for 2 years. He had a top 10 defense both years. Year 2, they made the Super Bowl. They had 70 sacks. I can't call the guy a bad coach. I can't.
Right. He was a good defensive coordinator. Good luck with him as a head coach, because it's a different set of rules. It's a different.
Oh, that I agree with. There's tons of good coordinators who are terrible head coaches.
And I think he may very well be one of them. All right, let's get back to the Eagles 2023. Sean Desai will be calling the plays from the sideline on Sunday against the New England Patriots. He's used the word himself. Sirianni used it. They were really vanilla in preseason. Now, John's down there for practices. Maybe they're less vanilla. Maybe they're not chocolate. Maybe they're 3 different colors. What do you call it again when you have strawberry?
Neapolitan or something?
Neapolitan. Maybe they're Neapolitan in practice, and you can actually read a little something, but we won't really know till Sunday. What do you think the biggest difference will be? Because we know there's going to be a difference. Might not be massive, might be even difficult to find, but what do you think will be the noticeable difference between a Sean Desai defense and a Jonathan Gannon defense? Or am I just talking out my ear hole and there'll be no difference? It'll be exactly the same, Les.
Well, I'm hoping the biggest difference will be kind of a hard to quantify difference, which would be that they'll adjust. When people do the same thing over and over again and it keeps working, that they'll, you know, change it up a little back there. But aside from that, I think up front, they have so much talent. They have way more talent than they've ever had before. They can do a lot of things. They can play 5-man fronts, 6-man, with a couple guys dropping back. They can do all kinds of things. They don't have linebackers, but they do have defensive linemen who are incredibly athletic and talented. I'm expecting to see a lot of, Nolan Smith is out there, but there's 4 or 5 other defensive linemen, and Nolan Smith is sort of a linebacker and sort of a lineman. And I don't know. John can tell me whether that's realistic or not, but
I would say this, Les, about Sean Desai. I think Sean spoke yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if anybody listens to Sean, because I'll bring up Jody. He's a little vanilla.
He's boring. Yes.
But for the 10th time, I think he said philosophy of eliminating explosive plays.
Yeah.
I'm written out, direct quote. You don't want to give up a chunk real estate of yards. It doesn't really match. Like, you can't just apply that to one player. It's a scheme thing.
Mm-hmm.
Defensive structure is not to give up big plays. We're not in the business of giving up free yards. We want people to earn things on us and make them work to earn things. I think he's got to hit people over the head. This is the 10th time. And by the way, Les, this is a Nick Sirianni thing. Nick Sirianni thinks that is the toughest way from an offensive standpoint. In other words, he looks at the defenses he has difficulty with, and he believes they're the ones, the Fangio defenses, that limit explosive plays. And that's his one goal.
Drive.
Yeah, that's his one goal, and it's not changing. And he's told people 10 times, and they won't listen. It's amazing to me. They're playing the same scheme. Is it going to look a little bit different? Yeah, because they have different personnel. But here's my problem. You lose C.J. Gardner-Johnson, playmaker. You lose T.J. Edwards. You lose Javon Hargrave. The personnel's not as good. So there's some upside with Nakobe Dean, but how quickly do you get there?
Yeah, I don't have any. We've talked before about Nakobe Dean. I don't have any idea what to really expect. I know expectations are incredibly high. I just haven't seen enough to buy into that. I saw what he did at Georgia, but this is the SEC, so I don't know. But I don't. As far as losing Javon was a great pass rusher for a defensive tackle. He was a terrible run defender.
Yes.
I do think there's enough talent there to more than make up for that. And that's a big statement, I know, but there's so many, with Carter and Davis and Williams, I just think they can piece together a group that can be fresh.
Oh, I agree with you with the front. I mean, they're so talented up front. That my concern is the, right up the middle, linebacker, safety. That's my concern. The
and that
corners
could
are
come
great
into
too.
play this week. The Patriots can throw it to the tight ends a lot. They have Gesicki and Hunt.
Hunter Henry.
Hunter Henry. Yeah. I almost got his name right. That was close. And they will not want to, with their offensive line, they're not going to want to be standing back, have Mac Jones standing back there, trying to find Juju Smith-Schuster 80 yards down the field. I think they're going to throw the tight end and they're going to run, and we're going to see if the Eagles are able to defend that. And I think it'll be interesting.
And that's the type of defense they want to play. They prefer you to run the football, and they think they'll be able to get off the field often enough that you won't be putting up points. No chunk plays. They're playing right into the Fangio defense that the Eagles like to play. All right, enough about the defense. We should talk about the Eagles offense, because as much as we focus on the defense and Gannon and where they rank, whatever, let's be honest. The Eagles are in the Super Bowl more because of the offense than they were the defense. We can note the ranking of the defense and give it its proper due, but the Eagles were a better offensive team. They were a defensive team, and they're going to be a better offensive team this year than a defensive team. Can they be a better offense than last year's offensive team, Wes Bowen?
Yeah, I think so. Jalen Hurts, every offseason he seems to take a leap forward. I don't know how much more leaping he can do at this point, but I think he talks like he's going to be, even better than he was last year. I think the running backs room they have now, they won't have a 1,200-yard rusher like Miles Sanders, but they'll have backs they can throw to if they want to do that. That was not a weapon they used last year. I think the receivers are excellent. The third receiver is still, wide receiver is still kind of iffy, but that's not a big deal. They've got the two main ones, and they've got Dallas Goedert. The offensive line, right guard has changed hands. I'll be shocked if that's a big deal, if that really causes them huge problems. I do think this offense can be better than last year. I think there were times last year when it wasn't efficient, that it left points on the table. Jalen would talk about that after games. And I think there's an opportunity to really tighten that up and be just a dominating offense this year. We kind of forget, because the Super Bowl and the playoffs kind of are what's in the front of our minds. But there was a point in the season where people were calling Jalen a game manager, that he wasn't that good a passer, that, blah, 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 blah. We saw late in the season, or at least in the playoffs, that he certainly can be a very devastating passer and can put up big numbers there. He doesn't have to run the ball in himself as he was doing early in the season. I think we'll see less of that. I think we'll see fewer offensive touchdowns from Jalen Hurts on his feet and more through the air. I think their offense can be better.
Maybe he was a game manager when his shoulder was hanging by a thread, but he's still able to win games. That's actually a positive. But when he was healthy, I think it was week 2 in Minnesota. Speaking of the Fangio defense, and a crappy Fangio defense, they came in and said, all right, he's going to have to throw the ball to beat us.
Yeah. And
he just killed them. Yeah. So from week 2 on, you kind of knew, all right, they were off and running offensively. I'm with you, Les. Their offense is going to be very good. It's just a matter of how good. Special teams, though, boy, there is a third base. I don't know if the Eagles know that anymore. They used to know it when Harbaugh was here, when Dave Bipp was here. They don't seem to care about poor Michael Clay, and it's Michael Clay Day, so Michael's going to talk. I don't know about what. He's got a practice squad punter.
Yeah.
All his coverage guys are gone.
Yeah.
What the hell are they doing on special
teams?
I was
going to ask you, is this a Sirianni thing? Because this has never been, in 20 years of covering the Eagles,
they always had. Yeah.
There's been years when it was up and down, or they made a bad decision, like the year Rory Segrist was in charge.
Yeah.
But it's a focus that they've maintained for many, many years through several coaching staffs, and it just doesn't seem to be there anymore. Is Howie Roseman not going to take, some charge of this and say, look, we can't be losing points every week on special teams?
Do you really believe that, Les?
That he can do that?
If you've got the construction of the roster and you got 100% to give out to who's pulling what strings and getting it done, do you not believe that Howie's about 75 to 80% of it, and the coach is getting his ear and talk to me, listens, and it may affect what he thinks, but he's the guy who's eventually going to make the call. I'm not dropping this on Sirianni's plate. This is Howie. We believe that Howie is the overseer of the roster.
It's never been the way Howie has operated in the past. So
here's my theory, Les. So I want to throw this out. The rule changes. Okay. Like kickoffs, not as important. So kickoff coverage, not as important. You got better punters, at least in other cities, not necessarily in Philadelphia, where you have these guys kicking the football 50 yards with incredible hang time, which has made punt returns less important. So punt coverage is less important. They do have a good field goal kicker. That's still important.
You got to have that. Yeah.
I say it's the rule changes. It's just not as important. So they've devalued it, just like running back and linebacker. That's my theory.
Let's kind of ask the question of both of us. I want you to answer. When you say they, break down they.
Yeah.
Is it Howie who was looked at the rules and said,
Yeah.
we need to put less, or is it Sirianni getting Howie's ear going, they changed the
No, I
rules
think
and we
it's
don't need
Howie.
as much for special
As
teams?
you pointed, I mean, Howie's in charge of the roster.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Okay.
I would say it's Howie's decision, but that's my theory. That's just a theory. I asked Howie after the draft.
He's a smart man, though.
Yeah.
And you saw the games unfold last season. You saw games over and over again where a special teams snafu.
The Super Bowl.
Yeah. Well, even way before that.
Yeah.
There were plenty of games where something, a blocked punt or something, the Eagles were dominating the game, and then all of a sudden it became a dogfight because of a special teams play. You've got to see that. I mean, he's watching the games. I just don't understand. I don't get it.
That's my worry week one. Marcus Jones is the best punt returner in football. And the Eagles don't have coverage guys.
And Belichick always has good special teams.
Yeah.
And it's not just returns. You could block a punt. You could block a field goal. You mentioned that Minnesota game from last year, John. The play I remember from that game is the blocked field goal where the holder had to run down a cornerback to keep a touchdown from being scored.
Yeah.
I mean, you just can't have stuff like that and win the Super Bowl. You can't. And if they're going to be like that again, I don't know.
Yeah. And Howie can be right, and I think we're all on the same page here. Howie is the main guy, and yes, special teams because of rule changes should be de-emphasized. Some, you can always overdo it. You can come to the right conclusion, but then overreact and play your hand too hard and say, well, it means nothing. Well, no, it means less. There's a difference between less and nothing. And I hope that Howie hasn't overplayed his hands and going special teams. I think it's a legit concern for the entire season.
I know of a perfect example of what you're talking about, Jody, from Andy Reid. When he was in Green Bay and he had Brett Favre as his quarterback, he was the quarterback's coach. He felt Favre was much too dependent. They had a dominant receiver. I'm going to say the wrong guy. It wasn't Shannon Sharp. It was
Sterling Sharp. I would think.
Sterling Sharp. Yeah.
Sterling. Yeah.
Well, they got rid of Sterling Sharp, and Favre suddenly started distributing the ball all around, and Andy thought this was better. So when Andy got to the Eagles, he didn't want to have a dominant receiver because he thought Donovan McNabb would just throw to that dominant receiver. Well, we saw how that worked out for years and years and years before he gave up on that idea. It was, again, he started with a good premise. Boy,
that's a delicate balance. That's a good point, Les.
That's what it's all about. Balance.
Yeah. You want to move the football around, and if you get somebody who's too good, I get what Andy was thinking, but
Todd Kingston and James Thrash.
All right, at Les Bowen, not less or nothing here. Our less is more. Right. So I would say that listen to Les's podcast. I was on there, by the way. Fun time.
Yes, you were. And this week I have Ben Volin from the Boston Globe.
Yes, Ben. By the way, I think Ben, I don't know if you guys saw, ask him this. I believe Ben was the one who asked Bill Belichick about long snappers. And he went off. You guys got to look for this. He went off on a 10-minute history lesson on long snappers and special teams. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It is unbelievable. So when you leave the show, and make sure you listen to the second hour, but go find Bill Belichick talking about special teams.
I certainly will. Yes.
Yeah. And ask Ben about it, because I think Bill said Ben a couple times, so I assume it was him. He just went off. And when you ask him about the history of football, he's unbelievable. Now, if you ask him about his players, he's terrible.
Yeah, it's terrible.
But
all right,
highly recommend.
Since this is the last time you'll be on our show before the game, if you want to give us your insights, game number one, you can. If you want to paint broad brush strokes, feel free. But you got to tell us what kind of a season you think the Eagles are going to have, Les.
Oh, the season. Okay, I was prepared to predict the game, but you want.
All right, well, I'm giving you your choice. I'm letting you go anywhere you want here. Either narrow focus Sunday versus the Pats, or tell us how 2023 is going to end for the Eagles.
Well, I'll do both. The game, they ought to get through it. I doubt that it'll be a masterpiece. They don't play the starters in the preseason. Bill O'Brien, nobody quite knows what to expect there with him and the Patriots offense. I see a tougher game maybe than they want, maybe like a 25-22 win or something like that against a pretty good defense. The season, I'm saying 12-5, something like that. And that's not, that's fewer wins than last year, but it's a much tougher schedule on the back end. And I just don't think, they can be 14-3. If they're 14-3 with this schedule,
that's a good team.
Super Bowl before the end of the regular season, because that would be incredible. But I think, unless people get hurt, this is a great team.
Les, great stuff. We appreciate it whenever you come on board. We're going to have you on plenty during the season. Thank you much for doing it today. Enjoy the game on Sunday.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
Thank you, Les.
Couldn't do a lead up to Eagles first game week without Les Bowen. Love when Les comes on with us. Been covering the team for a very long period of time. All right, Johnny Mac, are you South Philly bound? What do you got today?
Yeah, Brian Johnson got moved up. So now he's at 10. So now I got to speed up. The Eagles just moved that up while we were on the air.
What time was he supposed to talk?
After practice. So at like 12:30. But now I got to race down there like a lunatic and hope there's no traffic on 40. I'll tell you, this team is killing me, Jody, with the late schedule.
Hasn't even started yet. They're already killing you.
Right. All right. Yeah. Anyway.
Johnny
Nobody
Mac's
cares.
get
Inside baseball.
Yeah.
Hi, Mark Farzetta. I see you in the green room. There he is.
Inside the car for John McMullen is where he's got to get down to South Philly as soon as possible. All right, Mark Farzetta coming up next. Johnny Mac, you and I tomorrow. You're going to be leaving at 12:15, 8:15 tomorrow. You're going to give us a solid 15 minutes.
Well, who knows? Yeah, they'll move up Nick Sirianni till 8:30.
Yeah, good luck.
Starting to get a complex. I think they're doing it to me specifically.
To Screwbirds 365. Yeah. Thank you very much, Philadelphia Eagles. All right, Johnny Mac, safe travels. McMullen's off to South Philly. That means Mark Farzetta is going to jump in for him. We've got a good second hour guest coming your way as well. So stay right here on Birds 365.